Okay, so since I'm in control here, I should share my screen.
There will be other members joining also.
I just want to share my screen and I'll get it started. Where is the... Yeah. Yeah. I'm just trying to sort this out to get my PowerPoint. Okay.
I did not have the information in front of me, but I hope that you will introduce yourself. Pat had information and she would have done that, and she would have done a good job. So please help me out, Doctor. Introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay, then I'll do just that.
Okay.
I just want to get the PowerPoint running. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Let's see whether this would work now.
Judy, you could have done that.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and I'm sure we're all on the same time belt. It's 30 minutes past 11 here, and my name is Kole Odutola. I teach at the University of Florida here at Gainesville, and I've done so since 2006. But before then, I used to teach at Rutgers University as a part-time lecturer, and I think I did that for around about 3 or 5 years. My background is in media studies, which means that you can technically call me a hunter and gatherer of texts. That's my main focus, to look around the internet, to gather text, to hunt for text wherever I can find them, and then try and sort and make sense of what I find. So today, you will have to bear with me that the topics seem to be changing, but I remain within the same frame. It's African American Genealogy Research, reminding ourselves of what we have not forgotten. And I say that because one of the most difficult things to speak to an audience in which you do not have a profile of is repeating what they already know. I'm trying to avoid that, to repeat what you already know. So there's a roadmap. There's a roadmap to my presentation. And I'm going to start with a text, and it's titled "In Order to Be Born." And then I will then focus on what is called the pedigree collapse. Once we've done a little bit of that, we'll have a little break. I would show a video. I'll play it from here, but I would also send you the link to your chat, just in case anything happens. You can also play it and watch it along with us. It's really less than 30 minutes, and we can also cut it down. This is a conversation with a lawyer based in the UK, and he's talking about from data to publication. So when you've done all this work and research you've done, what could you possibly also do with it, apart from what you already do with it? And then I will conclude with the PowerPoint, which states the slave ships, the various sizes and stuff and all of that. And once we do that, the floor will be open for contributions, questions, and then responses. So like I said, I'm going to start with this. In order to be born, you needed 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. You need 16 second great-grandparents. You need 32 third great-grandparents, 64 fourth great-grandparents, 128 fifth great-grandparents, 512 seventh great-grandparents, 1,024 eighth great-grandparents, 2,048 ninth great-grandparents. For you to be born today from 12 previous generations, you needed a total of 4,094 ancestors over the last 400 years. Now, this is the deal. We want you to think for a moment about how many struggles, how many battles, how much sadness, happiness, love stories, and hope for the future that your ancestors had to undergo for you to exist in the present moment. You are the dream of many ancestors. So, I was having a conversation with a Danish woman, and I just want to throw this fun fact, but it also ties into what we're doing. And she said, we are one family. It is called pedigree collapse. Just look it up if you want, but I've done that for you. Someone studied a family tree for almost 50 years. And I'm sure most of you here have done similar things in studying family trees. She can attest that the Danish king, whose name is King Harald Bluetooth, round about 911 to 985 AD, is one of her ancestors. He is one of her 32nd great-grandfathers, which we shall we'll call GGF. But at that level of her family tree, she had application of 100,000 other 32nd GGF. So basically, according to her, all Danish people, all Danes, are a little less Northern European, but also have Bluetooth as one of their ancestors. The problem is only documentation. She says we are all Homo sapiens. You know, Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, and all how the evolutionary scale happened. So 200,000 to 300,000 years ago in Africa, a woman and a man got a child with a mutation that became the beginning of all people. Approximately 8 billion today on the earth. You can say that this couple were the real Adam and Eve. Now, you heard the word Bluetooth. The king had what looked like a Bluetooth. And when Ericsson, the company that started Bluetooth, to connect devices, they chose a king that sort of connected the various ethnic and tribal groups in that country and at that time. And they felt it was a name that was appropriate. And so that if you ever hear of Bluetooth, just know that it was named after a king that sort of unified the people. So having done that, I think I should just, those of you who already know about the pedigree collapse, you have to bear with me to, like I said, This is reminding you of what you have not forgotten. Pedigree collapse, also known as implex or Aschenschword, German for loss of ancestors, happens in genealogy. It describes a situation where a person has fewer unique ancestors than they ideally would because some ancestors appear multiple times in their family tree. The question is, how does it work? If two parents are related like cousins, they share some ancestors. When these parents have children, those children will have ancestors appear twice in their family tree, taking up spots that otherwise would have been filled by different ancestors. The further back you go in your family history, the more likely it is that the pedigree collapse has occurred. This can happen due to cousin marriage. In some cultures, marrying cousins was encouraged or even required. This practice increases the chance of pedigree collapse. There's also the question of limited population size. In small, isolated communities, the pool of potential mates is smaller. This can lead to a higher chance of marrying someone who is a distant relative. So what are the effects of pedigree collapse? One, reduced genetic diversity. When ancestors appear multiple times, it means there's less genetic variation in the offspring. Two, potential health problems. In extreme cases, pedigree collapse can increase the risk of certain genetic disorders. In genetics, we call this the gene pool. And the more diversified your gene pool, the greater the chances of coming up with diverse phenotypic expressions. Phenotype meaning what you present to the outside world. The genotype or the genome is what is coded in your chromosomes. And like you know, there are 22 and 1 sex chromosome. So what we say is that in places where there's inbreeding, you would notice that the offspring, they get smaller and smaller in terms of size. And that is because of inbreeding. So challenges in genealogical research is what I think might interest you here. When researching your family history, pedigree collapse can make it difficult to trace your lineage because you might keep encountering the same names. But there are sources that, in case you're interested in, that you can consult. And I can always, these are our Wikipedia resources. So I just to recap, I have told you exactly the total number of ancestors you would have over the last 400 years. Is there anybody who can guess the number I said before I continue? Does anybody have an idea of the total number of ancestors over the last 400 years you could have? Anybody?
You said that you should have 4,094.
Correct.
Ancestors needed to
Correct.
be.
On behalf of the School of Presentation, you have just won for yourself a self-sponsored trip to any part of the world.
Thank you.
Yes.
Self-sponsored.
Self-sponsor, okay.
Oh, yes, you're self-sponsored. We can help you with all the bookings that you need. All right. So
I wrote down, you are the dream of many ancestors.
Exactly.
But
yes.
Thank you for that number.
But the number is actually 4,094 ancestors over the last 400 years. So let's just break this a little. I'm going to put in the chat, just in case anything happens, the the Zoom, the link, I had a conversation with Dele Ogun, and I'm going to put this, so let me stop sharing for a while, and then I can have access to my chart. So I'm going to put this in the chart, and I'm also going to try and play it to see. Okay, so this is it. I'm going to play it from here, and also try and share my screen. Okay. So in case anything happens, you don't hear the sound or something, you can just go ahead and play it as well. Okay. All right. To come, but let's just start it. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. And I have searched on the internet to look at the
Could you turn up the volume, please?
As a lawyer, you've almost become an official historian, somebody who is very comfortable with reconstructing the history of a people. But my main focus is your method. How, because everybody talks about the research you do and the extent to which you go, that you even wrote the slave ship called Jesus in a year, which is very fascinating. But could you take us through your process? I know people have asked you about your inspiration. I'll leave that for a while. What I'm interested in really for now is the process of research, where you go, the materials that are possible, things that give you that light at the end of a tunnel that actually turns to be a real substance.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the question. I think it starts with my, I guess, training as a lawyer, especially as a trial lawyer. I'm used to interrogating evidence. And that's your starting point for research. If a lawyer gets a case, you need to, you're there when these events happened. And so you need to establish the facts. And that requires critical examination of the evidence, including possibly statements that your clients are presenting, and also the opponents are presenting, critically review them, and join the dots. So through the whole process as far, you're reconstructing history on a basis of there. An extension of that, you then go and read the relevant cases. But that's like anything of research. You have to have the reasoning process to identify what is relevant and what is not relevant, because there are so many cases out there. Likewise, in the course of writing the work of history, there are so many books and so many sources out there. So it's an elimination process to determine what needs to be read, in what detail, and then you then start the process of assembling your own narrative of those events, just like a judge does. The judge, after hearing the evidence from both sides, will then write a judgment. And in that judgment, it will set out the facts such that you can make sense of the conclusions that he or she will come to. And so if you pick up any judgment, you set out the story as a judge sees it, based on the evidence that is heard from both sides. And that's exactly my approach as far as writing, my approach to writing my works of history. I knew that people have spoken. I was not there. I will review what is being written critically, applying thoughts, processes to separate the wheat from the chaff. And when having distilled that information, I write and set it out in an organized way, telling effectively the story like that judge, say this is what happened. And it will be very different for what witnesses came to court to say, I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, but somewhere along the line, you know, there's a lie in there. And so that's my approach to writing history.
So let's start from day one. You talked about sources, and I like the analogy, the extensive analogy of what the legal profession does in the reconstruction of stories of things that we did not witness. Now, for me, could you, if it's not revealing the trade of your, the secret of your trade, I would like you to lay out for me the sources you start with, and then the next one, and the whole business of triangulation. Okay, I hear you that sometimes you read books, so meaning that there are books on slavery. You probably want to share one or two of those that you have read. And do you rely on Uncle Google, or do you rely on the AI generators that we have now? How do you navigate this forest of 1,000 information or stories?
Well, I guess it starts like this. I don't, from the outset, set out to write a history of any particular episode. And I'm really just educating myself because law is what I read, law is what I practice. But the history is my passion. And so I simply read the books out of interest, books that come to my attention. So, for example, when I was writing A Fatherless People, which is the history of Nigeria, the first book that I read was Samuel Johnson's The History of the Yoruba, because as a Yoruba man who had spent most of his life outside of Yoruba land, I wanted to acquaint myself with that story to get an understanding. And in the process of reading that, there will be issues that jump up, and that really now caused me to read another book. Perhaps it's a book that was listed in the footnotes or the endnotes that I've taken a particular interest in. Again, still at that point, I'm not thinking of writing the history of Nigeria. But like any journey, one step after another, you then get to a point where you begin to see a picture and say that there's a story here that needs to be told. And that story is coming out of for slave ship called Jesus, I read 80 books of different varieties. Some about the history of England, the Tudor England, because that's when their entry into the slave trade began. Maybe I had read a book, in fact, maybe I had read a book about the Enlightenment, the Age of Enlightenment in Europe and America. And in the process, when I write books, when I read books, I do mark the books. And such that when I'm going back now as a storyteller, a historian, I can fast track to my references and begin to paint that picture. And it's the picture that forms. There comes a point when you say there's a story here that needs to be told, and rather than everybody having to read 80 or 100 books that I had read, having read them, I would now put that story together. So rather than the reader having to follow exactly my journey, they simply follow my story. And if they have a special interest in any episode or any issue that I've mentioned, the books that I've read are all listed at the back of the book, the bibliography, and they can simply follow up and take it in their own direction.
Okay, so you've I mean, 80 books, that's a lot. Apart from books, what other sources do you use? Are there archival materials in the British Library, for instance, that can give us the sense of those 400 people that were taken by John Hendricks? I guess that's his name.
John Hawkins, who went to Sierra Leone. No, is it possible to find the description, the names, the identities of these 400 people that he captured in Sierra Leone, for instance? Well, one thing about the Europeans in general and the British in particular is that they do keep records of almost everything. And if you're sufficiently interested in the detail of any particular matter, then it is possible to go down to the various libraries, and they have so many libraries in England in particular, Britain in general, whether it's from London, you go down to the British Library, and you go to Oxford, and you've got the Burdon Library. So the libraries upon libraries. And if you're one who wants to go deeper, then those are places you can go to. They also have their National Archives, which is an online record such that any particular piece of information that you need, you're able to make contact with them. And like good librarians, they will source the material that you're looking for simply email it. So for example, I needed on the work that I'm working on, I wanted a map of the Niger company territories in Nigeria that were bought by the British government in 1899, when Nigeria was effectively named. It was a purchase contract between the British government and the Royal Niger Company. I wanted to know and understand exactly how much territory within what we now know as Nigeria, how much of that land space was belonged to the Royal Niger Company, and which was the subject of that contract of sale, for which they received from the British government something like about £860,000. I simply contacted the National Archives and asked them for that map, and it was emailed across to me. That obviously for a feeling, nothing comes from nothing, but this age that we're living, there's so much information that is out there. In the days of old, you used to have to physically go down to a library, sit there with perhaps with the assistance of a knowledgeable librarian, and work your way through the books. These days, you don't actually need to know your study, and most of the 80 books, in fact, all of the 80 books that I read for Saintship, it was the same number for A Fabulous People, were all read in this My Study, and with Amazon there, if you want to order your books. So it was during lockdown that I actually wrote a Saintship called Jesus. I was able to write it in the space of about 3 months because we were all locked in, and the information is there locked in with you. Technically, you've got your library, you've got your internet, and you've got your facility to place orders for books that you don't have or for materials that you don't have. So now the future belongs, or this age and the future belongs to those who know how to manage information. It's not a question of learning, gifting, searching for the information. It's almost on tap. It's now a question of what you do with the information that you've got, how you package it, how you arrange it for the benefits of those you want to reach.
Okay, I'm getting a good picture now. So let me zero in on the ships, the ships that carried enslaved people. One is clear. You have told us about the ship named Jesus. But I also know that in the process of your research, you came across other ships. I would want you to hopefully either drop their names or hopefully describe these ships
that carried people, because it would be a very good entry point to go and find out who was on it, how were they treated, and where did they land, and because most of the ships, according to what you said, always carry a manifest, sort of the cargo and the people that were on it. Could you just give a quick rundown for me, as somebody who is totally new to this, the ships, if you have a list of them, or if you had some, we can just reel off from the top of your head, like the one named Jesus, which was owned by the Queen of England. I would like to know some of those ships that you encountered. Well, I wasn't really interested in the number of the ships. I was only struck by the names. So once I had seen the pattern, I didn't need to go looking for how many more names are out there. The ones that struck me were the Jesus of Rebek. And then I realized that there was a pattern in terms of using religious names for these ships. When I also came across the grace of God as the name of a ship. And so that's when the point dropped with me to say, what is going on here? Why are these ships engaged in this evil enterprise? Why are they carrying biblical Christian connotations? I was more interested in the why rather than handling more of them. So they are, when we go back to Christopher Columbus's ship, the Saint Maria. So this was a pattern that was formed in terms of these ships of adventure, ships in the case of the particular, in particular, ships engaging in this evil enterprise. And what really struck me in the case of the Jesus of Rebek, which inspired the title of the book, A Slave Ship Called Jesus, was the fact that I knew that was owned by not just the British royal family, the Queen of England. What was more significant was the fact that she was the head of the Church of England. And so here's the head of the Church of England, the Anglican Church. Of the collection of ships that she has at her disposal, she is contributing the one bearing the name of Jesus to this enterprise, to this wicked enterprise. Now, that struck me. You're not just the Queen of England, you are also the head of the Church of England. And it's like the Pope having a ship named after God or Jesus or Moses, if you like, and that has been deployed in the sacred. The grace of God, is there anything else that you found out about the grace of God? That ship that was named the grace of God? But as I said, I wasn't particularly interested beyond the facts of the signals that I was picking up about what was going on in this trade. I only needed, you don't go into the fact that some of the sailors were, even whilst they were engaged in the trade, were the one writing songs that you and I sing in church today. Amazing grace, and how sweet the name of Jesus is. And yet, at the point that those songs, hymns were written, they were still active in the trade. Now, so it's that, it is that contradiction that really inspired the work that I was doing. Well, there's always this thing we always ask after an event is happened, that if you cast a backward glance to when you started, are there things you wish you knew then that you know now? In terms of the organization of information, the search for the information, because it's a journey, you've gone through a journey, you must have picked up one or two things along the way that you wish you probably knew at the beginning, in terms of from data to publication, all of those 80 books, the libraries and stuff. What is it that you could share with somebody who is interested, for instance, in finding out, which is research? Well, as I said, there is so much information out there. If you learn to read everything that is out there, you'll never get a book written. It's as simple as that. You read as much as you need to. Once, as I said, the story is formed, and I've done thorough enough research, given the scope of what I wish to write about, then you go ahead and produce the book. Now, obviously, more information will become available as the days and years pass by. There are new books that I've read. There's new information that is becoming available almost daily as we understand this world better. And what we can do with that is use that for a later edition of the book. You cannot put everything in the first shot, but you'll make sure that what you're producing now is well researched, which is my objective, and also well written from the perspective of the reader. And the results so far are that those boxes have been ticked. Well, before I let you go, before this is concluded, it should just be an icing on the cake. If you can open the book, I guess you have one very close by, and take an excerpt that when you read it yourself, it touches you, it sends you into that imaginary space of how human beings could do this kind of thing to other human beings. I know you've read places where you debunk the story that Africans were always fighting themselves, and that was not exactly the case. But is there any passage that when you read it again, it touches you personally? And if you can read that to us and then tell us why it touches you. All right, well, give me a second. Let me find the passage.
Okay. While he's finding the passage, it took a little while. I hope you have not been too bored to to sleeping, but let's just do a little quick recap. Is there anything? Okay, yes, save. Is there anything that you heard that you want to interrogate, you want to contribute, you want to extend? Before I would pull it forward to the point and then we'll go on. But I just want to make sure that that we're all still on the same page. You can unmute yourself if you have any contribution, observation you want to raise. I will take that before I move on.
Yeah, I have a question. The ship called Jesus. Could you elaborate on that a little more?
I thought that was going to come up. Yeah. Yes. Any other person? Okay. What I just done is I wanted to find out why the slave ship was called Jesus. Well, the slave ship named Jesus of Lubeck Lubeck, was originally a 700-ton ship purchased by King Henry VIII from the Hanseatic League, a merchant alliance between the cities of Hamburg and Lübeck in Germany. It was named after the Christian figure of Jesus, but the name does not imply that the ship belonged to Jesus or was used for any religious purposes. The name, like I said, belonged to Jesus, but it was not used for either church activities or anything. But here are some key points about the ship. The ship was built in the free city of Lübeck in the early 16th century. It was used for representative purposes and was acquired by King Henry VIII to augment his fleet. The ship saw action during the French invasion of the Isle of Wight in 1545. In 1563, the ship was chartered to a group of merchants by Queen Elizabeth I, and it became involved in the Atlantic slave trade and smuggling. So we should also remember that it was not just about carrying enslaved people, they were also smuggling things. The ship finally was captured by the Spanish forces in 1568 and later sold to a local merchant. That is how much I have about it. And I'm sure that as we go along, we're also going to talk about, generally about this. So if you're ready, I'm just going to go back to, he's reading an excerpt from it, and that will conclude the video, and we'll go back to what we were doing. Okay.
Abolished slavery, and England abolished it. Forget the narrative of that's the common narrative that it was them who abolished it for moral reasons and moral turnaround. That abolition, their abolition, post-dated the abolition of slavery by the Africans in Haiti after they effectively overthrew their enslavers. They shed and lost lives, blood, limbs in order to achieve that victory. And that uprising then inspired events in other parts of the slavery estate, and in particular Jamaica. And there's a passage titled or subtitled "Fire on a Mountain," and this is describing and explaining the uprising in Jamaica that followed. The plan had been for the start of the revolution to be signaled by a chain of fires on hilltop plantations. The first fire was sighted at 9 p.m. on the night of 27th December 1831. It's a quotation. The congregation which had assembled was dispersing in affright and would not return to my call. The only answer that could have got was, "Come on, fire." It was not an ordinary estate fire they spoke of. It was the preconcerted signal for our part of the country that the struggle for freedom had begun. There was a response to Kensington fire, another sugar estate high up on the mountain towards the interior. Both were visible to each other, and over a broad stretch of intermediate country, the one hoisted the flaming flag of liberty, and the others saluted it. Paul was able to roll around to follow the example, and it was followed. While it burned the broken fires, scarcely had night closed in, when the sky towards the interior was illuminated by unlimited glares, as fires rose here and there in rapid succession. Martial law was declared on the island on 30th of December 1831. All notable militia were called up, and troops and marines arrived at Montego Bay on New Year's Day 1832 with rockets and other artillery. This was a war with high stakes, as the British could not afford another defeat to a number of enslaved Africans, as had happened in Haiti, especially given the ongoing forward planning for the colonization of Africa. On the 2nd of January, the commanding officer of the British Army issued his proclamation. To the rebellious slaves, Negroes, you have taken up arms against your masters, and have burnt and plundered their houses and buildings. Some wicked persons have told you that the king has made you free, and that your masters will hold your freedom from you. In the name of the king, I come amongst you to tell you that you are misled. I bring with me numerous forces to punish the guilty, and all who are found with the rebels will be put to death without mercy. You cannot resist the king's troops. Surrender yourself and beg that your crime may be pardoned. All who yield yourselves up at any military post immediately, provided that there are no principals or chiefs in the burdens that have been committed, will receive your Majesty's gracious pardon. All who hold out will meet certain deaths. Robert Cotton, Major General commanding, God save the king. Still, the Africans did not relent. Arms they had none, or scarcely anyone made use of them. A desperate revolution, when every hope was at stake, supplied for a while the want of arms. These words have been written of the storming of the Bastille, but they are arguably more apt to describe the position of Sharp's men. The Spectator magazine of March 10, 1832, gives a sense of the impact of the war on the national discourse back in Britain. We believe the West Indian planter's fate is coming like a thief in the night. The mock insurrections of the Negroes will at length be converted into a real insurrection. The planters have blustered for several years about casting off the mother country and all that. They have forgotten that sedition is catching. It is easy to tell the whites of England that they are sharers in the crime of which colonial slavery is the fruit, that they have sanctioned by centuries of permission and by volumes of laws the right of the master over his labor. We grant all this, but what signifies such recriminations? The legislature of England will never, perhaps, destroy the planters in order to free the Negro, but it should be near drawn to doubt that one day, and that not very distant, an unconciliated Negro will destroy the planters in order to emancipate himself. The combination of the revolution in Haiti and the uprisings in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, the Africans have made the continuation of slavery untamed.
Wow. Why did you decide on this passage?
Well, it's an interesting passage because it adjusts the narrative about how the slave trade came to an end. The narrative that we've been taught, that's been pushed and propagated, was that slavery was abolished because of a sudden moral turnaround, or because the alternative rationalization is that it seems to be profitable. The passage demonstrates that that was not, neither of those explanations is correct. That the Africans, first in Haiti and then in Jamaica, quite aside from any other uprisings, were prepared to lay their lives on the line in order to force the change that they desired. And it's a lesson to the modern generation of Africans who have been led to believe that Africans never stand up and fight for anything, and that they will suffer any condition in perpetuity. Haiti, Jamaica, and all the other places, when the odds against them were even greater, they were prepared to fight to the death in order to get what belonged to them, which is freedom. And the passage also highlights the resistance that was still in force on the side of the slavers. They weren't ready to roll over and give this for them. They were ready to kill, and they did kill mercilessly. They had to be ruthless in order to try and deter further uprisings. But at the end of the day, the Africans came through, and it was that forced the abolition, which they followed in 1807 of the slave trade, and then later of slavery itself in 1833 on the part of the British. So that's why that passage does stand out for me.
From your explanation, you bring me to remembrance of Chinua Achebe's story that when elephants begin to tell their own stories of how many hunters they have killed, the whole narrative will change. And I think you more than demonstrated that Africans were not just passive, they did everything within their power to resist their oppressors. I just want to thank you very much for this labor of love that you've done, and for the opportunity to at least and I know that there are many more that will come from where these ones have come, the fatherless people, a slave ship called Jesus. I don't know what the next title will be. Well, we might not know what the next title will be. Okay. What I know for sure now is I just want to take you through what I prepared. And so if anybody has a question, I could take the question before I continue. All right, so we've done the video. I now want to just go ahead with matters arising. Right. African American Genealogy Research, reminding ourselves what we have not forgotten. Tracing African American family histories can present unique challenges, but with persistence and creativity, valuable connections can be uncovered. This presentation will explore effective strategies for navigating limited records and overcoming racial biases to uncover ancestors' stories. So since Mr. Ogun has talked about the transatlantic trade, the transatlantic trade was a horrific chapter in history, like we all know it, involving the forced migration of nearly 13 million Africans to the Americas. They were forcibly embarked on ships between 1501 and 1867. This cruel practice spanned centuries, fueled by the demand for cheap labor and the dehumanization of an entire people. It is on the records that an estimated 10.7 million disembarked alive. How then do we account for these people with an objective of tracing their families? So, like we said, there are challenges in assessing historical records, and I'm sure this group, more than anything, can attest, and you can include the challenges that you have encountered. The question of incomplete records, many records from the slavery era, and early 20th century were not well preserved or have gaps due to systematic biases. There's also restricted access. Access to certain historical documents may be limited, requiring patience and perseverance to uncover family information. And from those who have done this, sometimes when you want to clarify from families that are alive what their parents heard or knew, the children that you can talk to probably never took time out to talk to their parents. Just below me here is the oral history project, which is by the University of Florida. They have a YouTube site where they go they go to Mississippi, they go to places to interview those who are alive on various issues that concerns the African American. They have a large database. You were talking about visiting a place. If you ever think of it, before they move out of here, because I guess by summer, they're going to move out of their second floor office, you can come and visit them and see the amount of materials they have. But even if you don't want to, you can do it virtually. So there are also questions of racial biases. Racists, racist attitudes have historically influenced the way records were created and maintained, making it difficult to trace lineages. And I'm sure I speak for everyone here that you must have encountered some of this. But what are the strategies for overcoming lack of documentation? Expand your search. Look beyond traditional records to find clues in census data, military service records, and social organization archives. Utilize oral histories. Like I told you, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Project is just at Pew Hall, on the second floor of Pew Hall, University of Florida. Engage with family members and community elders to gather first-hand accounts and fill in gaps in the written record. Collaborate with others, connect with genealogy groups like yours, historical societies, online communities to share resources and insights. So since we've been talking about slave ships, what are the types and what were their designs? It won't come to you as a surprise that they all have names, and slave ships came in various sizes and designs, from smaller coastal vessels to massive multi-decked ocean-going ships. The largest held thousands of enslaved Africans in their cramped, inhumane holds, while smaller ships transported hundreds at a time. So they all have names. And this reminds me of a presentation I had about what was transported to Japan and to the port area in Japan. And what the Japanese did was they made sure that the merchants did not mix with the people. They made them stay in a particular place. But everything to the smallest thing was very well detailed. And the presenter was showing us how to assess that. And it was a whole load of medicinal ingredients that could be used. And the question the presenter was, trying to understand the alternative medicine in Japan. And you'll find a lot of things coming from Africa to that place. So they call one Baku or Bakutan. These were sailing vessels with 3 or more masts. They were relatively fast and maneuverable, making them suitable for long-distance voyages across the ocean. Then you have the brig or brigantine. These were smaller vessels with 2 masts. They were commonly used for transporting enslaved people, especially in the later years of the transatlantic trade. Then there was schooner. Schooner were small to medium-sized vessels with 2 or more masts. They were often used for coastal and inter-island trade, as well as for smuggling and piracy. but they were also occasionally employed in slave trade. I really find it very offensive that they call this thing a slave trade. I don't think it was a trade of any sort. And I think collectively, we must look for another name to call it. It wasn't a trade. There's a place in Nigeria called Badagry, and on the wall is an umbrella that for that one umbrella, they would take 40 persons and enslave them. So for one umbrella, they had for gunpowder, they have a number of people they would take. For just an umbrella, I mean, today we say just an umbrella. What did it mean that time? That they would give up 40 people just for that. And the question I kept asking everybody is, what are we today given for who knows what, a password or an app? What are we given that in another 50 years' time, everybody would look back and wonder how we gave that much without any thought, just like they did many years ago. Then there is a full rigged ship. These were large sailing ships, vessels with 3 or more masts, each rigged with square sails. They were among the largest and the most common types of ships used in the transatlantic trade due to their capacity to carry large numbers of enslaved people. If we move from there, we'll have the galleon. The galleon were large, heavy, armed sailing ships with multiple decks. While they were primarily used for military purposes and trade, some also were involved in slave trade. Regardless of a specific type, slave ships were typically modified to accommodate as many enslaved people as possible while prioritizing profit over the well-being of the captives. Below are some of the common features of a slave ship design: the tight packing, minimal facilities, secure barricades, minimal crew quarters. If you know these various types and designs, but what were the conditions aboard slave ships? It's not difficult to imagine what exactly they were. Enslaved Africans were packed tightly, and you could see gazillions of pictures of them, how they packed them, crammed, poorly ventilated holes with little room to move or breathe. There were shackles. There were shackles to the feet, shackles to the hand, chains and other restraints were used to control the captives, causing immense physical and psychological suffering. Then 3, food and water were often scarce, leading to starvation, dehydration, and the spread of disease among the captives. Unsanitary conditions, lack of medical care, and the constant threat of violence and abuse further contributed to the immense hardship faced by those on board. The Middle Passage, the transatlantic voyage, enslaved Africans were forced into this overcrowded ships, like we've said, the inhumane conditions, and the psychological trauma. Now, talking about this psychological trauma, 3 years ago, before COVID, a scholar came up and said that psychology should accept what is called the post-slavery trauma, and that this has not been effectively dealt with. And I think it's a topic that needs to be looked into. Maybe the historical arm of this chapter might take a look at the emotional and psychological toll of the Middle Passage, which was very immense, as Africans were torn from their homes and families, stripped of their humanity and dignity. And the thing about trauma is that it's lodged in the genetics, the genome of the people, and it gets transferred without an understanding. You look at somebody, they behave in a particular way, you don't understand why you can't even trace the root of it. But psychologists have been pushing, just like they pushed for the post-traumatic stress disorder that soldiers bring back when they go. It has not been agreed yet that there is something about post-slavery traumatic syndrome. But this is something probably another time. If you look at it graphically, mortality rates on slave ships, we expect it to be large, and it's not against what we already know. The mortality rates aboard slave ships were staggering high, with an estimated 15% of Africans dying during the notorious Middle Passage transatlantic voyage. Coastal voyages within Africa saw lower, but still unacceptably high death rates of 8%, while the treacherous West Indies routes claimed as many as 20% of the captives. You heard Mr. Deliogu talk about revolts. There were slave revolts and uprising, and people turn around and say, why is Haiti the way it is? We all know that that uprising, the French put a penalty on them that they're probably still paying up to today. Enslaved Africans on board slave ships occasionally organize mutinies and uprisings in desperate attempts to regain their freedom and escape their captors. Revolts such as the Amstrad incident saw captives successfully seize control of a ship and navigate it back to Africa, sparking international outrage. However, most uprisings were brutally suppressed, with leaders executed and the remaining captives facing even harsher conditions and punishment. So what is the legacy of these slave ships? They have haunting reminders. The physical remains of slave ships serve as haunting reminders of the horrors of the transatlantic trade, preserved as memorials and museums to educate future generations. What's modern shipping? While the transatlantic slave trade has been abolished, the shipping industry that once transported millions of enslaved Africans continues to thrive, now facilitating global trade and commerce. And I'm sure you all are aware of the move to present some of these companies that still exist today, to present them with an invoice. It is called a predated invoice, because some of them have not been made to pay for it. When we talk about reparation, people tend to just focus on money. But there's somebody saying, if you went to a place and you bought a product that should cost more, you bought it for less, without any negotiation, then you stole it, and you must be made to pay for it. They must be given invoices to say, this is what you still owe us. But because we're not yet a united force, we're still divided as Africans on the continent, as Africans in the diaspora, and then Africans in the Caribbean, or Blacks in the Caribbean. We haven't yet formed a united force to demand for what was taken and what was stolen, because that is exactly the basis of the primitive accumulation of capital that we're seeing today. There's the question of memorializing victims. And I heard you talk about plantations. My visit to the one in outside of New Orleans, in Louisiana, left me with a very bad taste because of the way in which the haunting stories of people have almost been capitalized, and people talk about it without any feelings at all. When the guides just talk like, this is, and with smiles on their faces, and it could be very traumatic for somebody who feels that this is not a made-up story. This is not 12 years, is it 20 years, 200 years of slavery? No, this is reality. This is something that happened to others. So there are numerous, what is the purpose of that a dead soldier was buried with full military honors? Or of what use is it to the dead soldier? But Yes, there are issues of memorializing. Numerous monuments and memorials have been erected worldwide to honor the millions of Africans who perished during the brutal Atlantic crossing, ensuring their suffering is never forgotten. It is not only just the question of being forgotten, but the question of making a repair. You know, reparation comes from the word to make repairs, and repairs have not been made, and we're glossing over things. They're saying get over it, and that things will be okay. Things will not be okay. Well, what are the genealogical connections? Many individuals are using historical records and passenger manifests from slave ships to trace their families' roots and uncover their personal connections to the transatlantic trade. How to locate names of persons on ships? There are passenger manifests like we've talked about. The British are very, very meticulous in keeping records. And this can be accessed. Sometimes, like Mr. Ogu said, you have to pay some money to get what really should be yours. But it's the way of the capitalist enterprise. Then there are shipping logs. Captains' logs and other shipping documentation may also contain names and details about the enslaved Africans transported. This provides another important source for genealogical research. Then digitized archives. Many historical archives are now being digitized, making it easier to search for and access records related to the transatlantic slave trade online. Now, this is what we call the metadata. You know, it's the metadata that allows you to be able to search around and find what you're using. Once you have the right keywords, you'll be able to get there. So the genealogical databases, specialized databases and resources for tracing family histories can help researchers uncover connections to the slave trade and locate specific individuals. So what do you do when you get all of this? Using data for genealogical research, leverage passenger manifests and shipping records, explore digital these, utilize specialized genealogical databases and community resources to trace your ancestral rights. And now you know that we have started to use DNA, and I'm sure you are quite aware of all of that. Without much ado, I would just like to stop it here. It is 12:24, and then we can, like we say, we can have observations, comments, questions, and wrap it up before you all get too bored.
Questions, anyone, comments?
Or contributions. If there are no questions, if there are things you want to add, please, it will be nice.
I see someone that didn't get introduced in the beginning. Catherine, we all introduced ourselves. Would you like to introduce yourself to the doctor?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear you.
Hi, I'm Catherine McClatty. I'm a member at large, absentee for quite a while. And I'm happy to be back and see everyone. I do have a question in reference to the ship type. Was there any particular reason why they used larger slave trips versus the smaller ones? Were the larger ones also used to transport goods in addition to people, or were they all used to transport people?
Well, this is, I mean, for today, we can always know that there are people who will buy trucks that are maybe 15 feet long, depending on how much. This thing costs good money. They cost time to make. And sometimes, you want to maximize your profit. Anybody who has been in aviation, for instance, will tell you that passengers are the cheapest of all. It is the goods that the plane, the freight that they carry, that actually gives them the money. If you look at the breakdown of what you pay for a flight, you will find out that the airlines get very little. But what is not taxed as much is the freight. So the thing about it is, yes, when you have container ships, for instance, when they take container full of loads to any place today, modern maritime, if they take anything today and deposit the containers, the expectation of the owners of a vessel is that they will be able to get something back, carry something back so they don't go empty. And sometimes some of them would bunker oil. They would steal oil from those they have because they have ways in which they can store it, and then they sell it. Because it's not very, very profitable to just go one way and not bring something back. So it's the same principle that I'm sure will guide. And is a vessel small? If the vessels are small, it means that they could be fast. They can get to where they're going faster and turn around. No, they were very greedy. And the reason why the Queen of England actually acquired the Jesus of Lubeck was because the first trip the man made, it was very profitable. He made a lot of money. Everybody was into it. Everybody was into it. They were making money. And till today, many of them have not owned up. They don't even want it told. When they tell Yale that, are you ready to tell us the money that was used in the founding of Yale? They don't want to talk about it. And once you say that, then they would increase the scholarship to African American students and stuff and all of that. So yes, we know it. We know where most of them. It's very traceable to the point that we all know that the owners and the families that own some of these slave ships, when they discontinued them, the government, the British government, offered to pay them, and they were still paying some of them up till like 10 years ago. Now, so the disparities there will be a method to the madness. The double deckers, some of them were even done in a way that they were trying to avoid those who were trying to arrest them. So they would make it double decker so that by the time you get there, it has a false bottom. You will probably not know that people are there, only if you smell peace and that. But sometimes they were very crooked business people.
Yeah.
I hope you know. They're not what you see today.
They even
They're
found
not
a slave ship in South Carolina. That was when slavery was not supposed to be happening anymore. They found a sunken slave ship in South Carolina. I can't remember the name of it. But you mentioned, I'm sorry, I have another follow-up. You mentioned about trauma in our DNA. I did hear a doctor here in America, and I think she's with the National Institute of Health, and they are actually studying now PTSD and trauma in our genes from the slave, I won't call it slave trade either, from the slave exercise. And I don't know if at some point they're going to put some type of monetary value on it, but there have been a few universities that are allowing people who come from families of former slaves, like Georgetown, to actually get free education based on the fact that their families were enslaved, and it was supported by Georgetown University. So there are a few universities that are stepping up to do that, but not nearly enough.
It's always tokenist, and it's always distraction to the fundamentals. But we're giving this person, and they hold them up as poster boys or girls for the very little they're doing, instead of addressing the fundamental issues. The question of carrying it in our DNA, in the Yoruba cosmology, we say that every living being is a sum total of the living, the dead, and the unborn. And I always would express it to American students that every human being carries the sex chromosomes and genes, either through the ovary or through the sperm. And then you also carry the other chromosomes that are responsible for who you are and who you become. And then you as that living entity. So you carry that. And for those of you who probably would have seen families where most of them are dark skinned, and all of a sudden they give birth to a child, and that child is light complexioned, or even looking like an albino. And was the woman unfaithful? No, she wasn't unfaithful. It is just something we call atavism. Atavism is throwback. The whole question of if a child becomes male or female has to do with probability. And it's the X and the Y, or the X and the X. Yeah, these are the ones that you see. But what is within those chromosomes? What is within the X? What are the different loci or the locus that must correspond for it to be phenotypically expressed? There are things that will be taken many generations behind, and that is atavistic, which is throwback. So even this, so when you find out, why is this the black sheep of the family? Everybody else seems to have their acts together, but this particular one, what? It could just simply be, they say, oh, something is losing his head. No, he didn't take drugs. He didn't do anything. It was just one of those things, and you know that in genetics, we talk about mutation. How do you explain mutation? Everything else in the field, you will see, they're all a particular kind of color, the flowers coming up, and all of a sudden you see one that is purple, and we call it mutation. So it's the same thing in families. All of these things that have been there, they transferred. But the question or that issue is also debatable. People say that, can we inherit such things? There are articles, if anybody is interested, I can send it to you, that when women get pregnant, they even get fragments of chromosomes from their children lodged into theirs. I have the article with me. I can share it with anybody. These are strange things that happen within the human physiognomy, which sometimes we don't talk about. So trauma might not be a trait, but I'm sure there are ways in which it expresses itself in generations. And I am one with the scholar that's been calling that we should do some more work and think through it.
And can I ask one more question?
Please do.
There's a new company out called African Ancestry. They're doing DNA just based on where you originated in Africa, not so much the percentage of what your ethnicities are. And a couple people have questioned it because it says that they only have certain countries come back, like Cameroon, and it just seems strange that the DNA only comes from certain areas. And so someone rationalized it and said that because only the west part of Africa, that's where the slaves came from. What's your take on that?
Well, as you were talking, it was going back many years ago, must be like 30 years, when they started the Genome Project. And the Genome Project was to reconstruct, as it were, the gene map. And most people and most scholars and scientists and biologists participated in it. I agree that it's it's what you have. It's what we call the facts speak for themselves. The stupid thing about facts is that you can't alter it with your emotion. You can't change it with what you think it should be. We're not in the realm of Trump and his post-truth era. It's what is there that it will present. And because who are those in the diaspora? Remember that in North Africa, there the slavery was Arab slavery, and most of them did not come to the Americas. So we don't usually get people from, but the continent of Africa, which people don't talk about, is that there was massive intermarriages, there was massive movements and migrations from places, and we're thoroughly mixed. We're thoroughly mixed. And so what you get will be that complexity. You know, it's how to now read through it. But I can tell you, as time goes on, it will be more refined and more refined to a point in which you probably can almost get the clan or the ethnic group in which you come from. But for now, let's make do with what we have, that at least a Black person is related to Scottish people or related to Irish people and Portuguese. Yes, if you go to Cape Verde, no, Cape Verde, by accounts, is the capital of rapes, and there are very few families that you would find they can't even tell where they are, because the Portuguese slave ships would anchor there, and they did things with the women, and the children are all over the place that we don't know. And then yeah, things like that happen. But yeah, the Ancestry.com and all of them, they also have made it that there is a basic. The amount of money you pay will be how much work they will do to trace it down. This is the whole thing about the capitalist ethos. They're not making money from this. Well, God bless their soul. People make money from other people's misery. It's what the name of the game is. But I wish there were other ways that if you ever get hold of a book called The Language We Cry In, you'll find out how just by saying things, and then they found out that, oh, this song that you're singing, there's somebody in Sierra Leone who knows the song, and then they begin to make the connections. There are various ways. Somebody was telling me about a book. Is it The Dream We're Crying or something like that? That there's also another version of it. I would get that. But yes, there are other ways in which we can find out. If you're interested, you should look at the ethnic map. In a country like Nigeria, there are almost 371 ethnic groups in Nigeria. Distinct. Wow. 371. So don't be swayed when you hear things like Yoruba. Yoruba is one, and it has subdivisions. So if somebody said to you, oh, we've traced your ancestry to Yoruba people, it's just the amount of money you paid. No, the question would be, are you Ekiti? Are you Ijebu? Are you Ijesha? Are you Eko? And it goes on and that. And yet when you even still get into that, we probably will be talking about some more subdivisions. So it's the way we have divided the world. But it's amazing to see that there are 371 and counting ethnic groups, distinct. Some of them with their own languages. Don't be swayed by these things called dialect. You know, they say, oh, Africans speak dialects. No. A language is one spoken by a group with superior force. Every other person, they will say yours is a dialect because they are the superior. And you always know that there will be conflict when there's contact between languages. But there are names. You can see the names. 371 different ethnic groups around.
I actually started looking at symbols
Yes.
because I'm interested in the American Indian aspect too, because in Florida we have Seminole Indians who are just as dark as Africans. And because, you know, the book They Came Before Columbus shows how we were traversing the world long before the slave trade. So I noticed in some of the music and the dance and the symbols, they're very similar across various continents, religions, culture, and music. So I'm wondering why no one ever looked at the similarities amongst people based on those things. And I'm sorry if I missed the beginning, but did you give some resources as to how we could find various ship manifests?
Yes, that I did.
Did you? Okay.
The question of the First Nation and the indigenous people, there's a whole Coursera class that I have just started to look at, and it's talking about the various indigenous groups. Their stories about the creation story is so similar to that of the Yoruba
Yes.
people. Yeah.
Yes.
And the question you asked is what we've always asked. Why is it that both of us have not come together to form a formidable force? We
Yes.
cannot form a formidable force because, one, we have not learned how to build bridges between the Africans who migrated from the continent and are here right now in America with those in the Caribbean. We have not found a way to explain to African Americans why we are here and why we should see ourselves as brothers and not fall for the trap of Skip Gates, Wonders of Africa. If you see the documentary and that resentment, for how long are we going to carry that resentment? Your fathers sold us into slavery. And then when you come here, we are the last to be hired, the first to be fired. They give us jobs that belong to us because the colonizers gave you some kind of education. It's such a complex thing that when you now take that to the Native Americans that live in reservations, they don't even want to, they've done it before. They opened up their territory and it ended up with the Thanksgiving that you have. You know, how they were mercilessly killed. Once bitten, twice shy. I don't think they're going to allow us into their world. We both are going to learn from a distance. We do the same thing when it comes to health. They use herbs, we use herbs, but there's not going to be a bridge that will say, look, our stories are the same. We've suffered from the same oppressors, but we just need to keep studying, and we will find out that some of our genes are logged into theirs and theirs into ours. Well, because how else do we have similar creation stories? No, but
I think as more stories are told, is starting to come out. Disney actually has a Native American superhero now, and they actually reenacted their creation story in that series, and it's called Echo. And they actually went to the Choctaw Nation to make it original, to show that what their origin story was. And that's the first time anyone has ever documented their origin story and even shown their dances and their tribal wear. So I thought that was interesting that they actually went to the Choctaw Nation to make it as original as they possibly could.
always suspect Disney.
Yeah, but at least they made
Always
the
check them
effort to do it.
You know, they're like the devil. If you're going to eat with them, make sure that you have a 16-mile pole to eat with them. Because the misrepresentation and the untruth will be so innocuous that you will once you swallow it. Somebody asked me that why is it that people on the continent that have been many generations removed from colonialism are more colonized than those who were close to it. And I say there are two words, imperialism and hegemony. You know, hegemony does not put a gun to your head. It just makes things that you could do yourself, it will make it cheaper over time. And then you will buy it. And then you will stop using yours. I don't know why any African or Black person should subject himself or herself to Orthodox medicine when you know that the basis of Orthodox medicine is that they would send a poison to kill the pathogen. It's that simple. That is the basis of that. And yet the alternative one, the alternative medicine, is that they would strengthen, they will strengthen your system to fight the pathogen without any side effects. And yet we look down on it. We don't take it seriously.
More people are taking it serious now, though. More people are studying the whole homeopathic way of doing things.
I like the quantitative, you know, the qualitative expression you use. More people out of what number? I tell you, 1,000 out of 1,000,000 is more people. There were 50 before, and then we have 1,000. These are the things about us that we celebrate, and why not? When 1,000 of us are doing things, we're wearing African clothes, you know, and you see 50 more people, we always just rest that, oh yes, of the 2 million people that are around, at least 2,000 are doing it, and then we just rest. Whereas that should be the beginning.
I only know this because I've been studying farming and permaculture and horticulture myself. And so I'm part of various groups. So social media here in America is helping that a lot because more information is getting out. And I really believe that's why they're planning to try to shut down TikTok, because so much health information, holistic health information is getting out there. Whereas before, Big Pharma actually shut all that stuff down and was hiding it. So those of us who really want to know, white and Black, are studying it and trying to go back to the roots and origins of what actually heals your body naturally.
If you know those who want to shut TikTok, tell them not to bother. Because I can tell you for free that the reason why the Western pharmacopoeia and the system works is because it's in line with the mode of production. You can't, they know for sure that you cannot afford to stay out of work for 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks. You're just going to be homeless very soon. So they know that. The reason why they pelletized all of those things and you just swallow them is because it brings instant healing and you go back to work. It's the same America. A woman gives birth. All she's given is just 6 weeks to get herself together and return to work. This is 6 weeks or 9 weeks, you know, and return to work. In where I come from in Nigeria, you'll be given like 9 months to stay at home with your child, heal, and then come back. You know, but it's the mode of production. We have to get you well, come and get back to work. This other one, like you said, holistic. It's not only interested in your body, it's interested in your soul, in your spirit, and is interested in your family. Because what you are suffering, that headache might not even be from your system. It might be from the energy that you're environment. So at another forum, this is one of my pets.
Mine too.
my first degree is in botany and it was in genetics. So this is something that is my playground, you know, but it's also to link it with the economic system. The economic system is what really, you know, you never had this kind of healthcare before. Most of you might think that because we're all born into it, that the hospital has been the only. But there are people who have actually worked on to find out the year of introduction of hospitals. It's a really crazy idea to have these massive hospitals there. It never was.
Right.
It was another kind of health system, you know, and it wasn't concentrating people who are sick into one building. How crazy that can be is beyond my mind, you know. But again, it's economical. Those who are in charge of deciding what you pay and how you're healed are not even doctors. They're medical administrators. Let's not go too far away from genealogy. I can see Sister Patricia looking, where is this guy taking us to now? No, I sometimes do not like, you know, when you step on things that for you, for decades I've been mulling over. I sometimes cannot help myself. But another time we'll probably, if you check in the chat, I already sent you the Indigenous Canada, the text from the video. It's
okay.
Right. So
thank you.
Well,
it's almost 1 o'clock.
This conversation could go into many different ways. And the interesting thing is, as you were talking about the whole healing piece of it, which in some ways is related to genealogy, because it gives me an opportunity to reflect back on those elderly aunts that I had that practice using herbs and those kinds of things to heal you, and would never, ever think of taking you to the hospital. I am the recipient of one of those health remedies of a great aunt who said, no, she's not going to the hospital and we're going to heal her. And I'm fine. I'm crazy, but I'm fine. But first of all, Doctor, I want to thank you so much for your presentation. And I just want to share a couple of comments. One of the things that I was struck by was the enormity of my tree, my family tree, just hearing the number, you know, as you're going through this journey or doing your research, you know, you think of your great-grandma and then great-grandma once removed and then twice removed. And the idea that you're talking about many, many, many removals, you know, is just overwhelming. The other thing that came to me as I was listening to the presentation around the slave ships, and I'm nowhere close to researching slave ships yet, I'm trying to pick out that one relative of mine that at some point in this journey got the name Hicks. Okay, my family name. Who was that individual that came off of one of those slave ships that ended up with the name Hicks or the name Hendricks? And I'm questioning, will I really be able to find out who that individual is? And it's going to take a lot of researching. It's going to take looking at a lot of data. And where will I find that data? And will I be able to make sense of it once I see it? So you really raised a lot of questions in my mind as I was listening to your presentation. And when I looked at your bio, and I'm sorry that I was not able to share it with everyone, but when I look at your bio and your interest in the environment, your interest in cultures, your interest in photography, journalism, languages, etc., all of those indirectly have some impact on genealogy and our research and what our families did, what our family members did, you know, over the years. So you have at least given me a lot to think about in terms of maybe even how do I continue to pursue the research and get the information that I need in order to build this massive, which I now understand is a massive family tree. But it has been very, very helpful for me. Are there any other comments before we close? I want to thank Judy for making the connection for our chapter. I hope that you will be available to address us again at another time. We can hone in on a specific area of genealogy that you can give us more nuggets to help us in our research, because you've given us a lot today to think about. So I am hopeful that you will be available again at another time to support us in our journey for finding out who our ancestors are.
Pat,
Yes, Catherine.
I have a statement for the group as a whole. I know I've been away and I've had a number of challenges, and I just wanted to thank you all. I'm still in flux, but I wanted to tell you all in person because the mail was so screwed up in Atlanta. I don't know if everybody that I actually sent thank you cards to actually got them yet, but I wanted to personally thank you all and let you know that your support means the world to me. And it is still difficult, especially with Mother's Day coming up.
Yes.
But I love you all, and I can't thank you enough for all that you've done for me and my family. And it means so much to me. I had no idea how much support I had here in Daytona. And I really appreciate that.
Well,
so thank you.
I'm sure each and every one of us appreciate your being thankful, but we're glad that we were able to provide whatever support we've given you and your family. And it's good to see you. I am really
It's good to see you all too.
to join us this morning.
And yes, before we close, I'd like to say a personal thank you to Dr. Odutola. You are a great mentor, a great friend. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you.
I think may have left us, but hopefully he heard that. Thank you. It's been good getting together. Ann and I will send out some kind of communication relative to a June event of some sort. We don't know what that is going to look like. Everyone seems to be in flux and so many different things are going on, but hopefully we can get together for lunch or a drink or whatever in the month in preparation for our upcoming season starting in September. And do you have any comments? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Good being on mute. I want to thank you for making all the arrangements, you and Judy, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. This concludes our meeting. Dr. Udutulo, thank you again for joining us. We will be calling on you again to assist us and provide that necessary history that is so critical to doing our research. So it's 1 o'clock.
Pat, I did put my contact information in a chat, so
Okay.
hopefully people will contact us and say, yes, I want to join your group.
Yes, we're looking for members. We are looking for members, so hopefully you will join us. So with that in mind, everyone, have a great rest of the weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all of us, and hope that your Mother's Day is restful and full of fond memories, and look forward to seeing everyone sometime in June for just a get together. Okay.
I just have one suggestion. Before you go, there's a way in which you can save the chart.
Okay.
There's some links there that you can also use. Just if you go to the top of a chart, you will see Save Chart. Just click on it. It will take you to a folder, and then Show Folder. Click on that Show Folder, and it will display itself. And you can keep that. But I can also save it and send it to you all.
Could you do that, please?
Not your problem at all.
Send it to me, then I
All right, I'll do that.
the organization in the chapter. We would appreciate that.
All right.
Okay.
So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.